Hello guys, and welcome back to Dragon Age Lore. Now this is something that I was hoping to make bi-weekly, but due to time constraints and just overall scheduling issues and conflicts, I was unable to make this into a bi-weekly show, so I decided to make it monthly, and had to kind of skip last month in itself because, like I said, it's just overall I began to get very busy. So essentially, we're back to it though. So Dragon Age lore. One of the big things I wanted to cover was the Blight, and now I could do all the Blights really in one video, but that would be ridiculous because there's a lot of information to have to do with that. So today we're going to be talking about the First Blight. In 395 ancient, 7 Tevinter magisters, each of the high priest to one of the old gods, opened a gate into the Golden City with blood magic and entered it physically. According to the Andrastrian chantry, the result was catastrophic, and the city turned black, and the mages came back twisted and corrupted, devolving into monsters, the first Darkspawn. The taint they carried infected others, turning them into Darkspawn as well. The memories of Orzammar record that the Darkspawn first appeared in 800 of the Tevinter era. By chance or design, they located Dumas in his prison and corrupted him, freeing and then transformed the old god into the first archdemon. The Darkspawn then multiplied, and in 380 ancient or 815 Tevinter era, attacked the underground kingdoms en masse, concentrating on the first of the deep roads. Although they were early warnings of the advancing horde, travelers who mysteriously disappeared, patrols of Dwarven warriors going missing on duty, they were subtle at best, and nothing was able to truly indicate what was about to come. The Andrastrian chantry teaches that the magisters were trying to usurp the Maker's throne and were cast out of the Golden City for their sinful pride. In their depravity, they sought the old gods, finding Dumas slumbering within the earth, began the Blight, and the dwarves, on the other hand, give little credit to the chantry's beliefs, but they themselves have their only theories about the origin of the Darkspawn. As far as the dwarves were concerned, the Darkspawn kingdom first appeared underground and invaded the deep roads and began to attack the more remote western thags. At first their war was relatively small, fighting in small bands, and then grew to a massive horde and overran the Dwarven Empire within a few years. However, if the chantry's history and Orzammar's memories are both true, then Tevinter mages would have entered the Fade, been cursed, fled, found Dumas, raised an army, and then overrun the western thags all in 1 year. And it seems more likely that the magisters had already been seeking out the Dumas for some time. A few Grey Warden scholars believe they may have even found him by that time, and it was he who helped them reach the Golden City. Different groups of mages may have been pursuing different agendas that were later fused as well. The First Blight was disastrous for anyone who lived during that time, but arguably none more than the dwarves. Despite their advanced technology, the dwarves fought a desperate fight, and brought to bear, the Darkspawn tore through them and brought the dwarves to the near brink extinction. The more remote thags, completely unprepared for the hordes that poured out of the darkness, were the first to fall in a matter of days. The Darkspawn swiftly overran the sites of their early victories and used them as staging grounds to push further into the Dwarven Empire, conquering entire kingdoms in the span of decades. When the First Blight began, the Dwarven capital of Orzammar was caught in the midst of a bitter inter-house war. The greatest members of the warrior caste were either busy battling in petty skirmishes or had been injured in those fights. When news of the Darkspawn horde had arrived, every noble Dwarven house wished to have their own thag defended, leaving to political chaos and disorganized defense. The assembly was so tied up with the infighting that the Darkspawn spread unchecked into the gates of Orzammar. Adukin of the warrior caste, realizing that his entire race was facing extinction, grudgingly took command of the armies, calling upon the smith caste to supply them with arms, enlisting the aid of the mining caste to collapse overrun passages, and bypass the assembly and the nobles entirely. Eventually, Adukin achieved victory, but with the loss of countless thags. In reward for his heroism, Udicane was made paragon by a near unanimous vote of the assembly. In 255 ancient or 940 of the Tevinter era, the Dwarven smith Calderin discovered a method to forge a construct of steel or stone with a great strength and survivability. These living engines, named golems, became one of the dwarves' most effective weapons against the darkspawn. For the time, first since the start of the Blight, the dwarves were able to reclaim thags and sections of the deep roads that had been long given up on or lost. Golems became the backbone of the dwarven armies, and some were even exported to Tevinter and a few groups of mages. However, to each golem to require life required the soul of a living dwarf. Initially, volunteers gave their lives willingly, but controversy arose when they began to have no more volunteers. The dwarven monarch at the time was King Vaetor, who became greedy and forced to cast lists, criminals, and political enemies onto the anvil. When Calridian opposed the king, after 6 years of continuous production, he was forced into a golem. In 248 Ancient, or 947 of the Tevinter era, just as the dwarves were beginning to believe that they were winning the battles against the Darkspawn, Calridian vanished into the deep roads, taking his followers, the anvil, and the secret of the golem's construction with him. Many were accused of having a hand in his disappearance, but no culprit was found. Many expeditions were sent into the deep roads to find him, but all were pushed back by the Darkspawn. After years of debate in the assembly, Queen Getha sent an entire legion of steel, a legion made up of 126 golems, into the deep roads to recover the anvil, but none of the golems returned. The Shepherdate declared Calridian dead, dashing any hope of a swift victory over the Darkspawn. Due to the incalculable loss of the Legion of Steel, all the golem regiments were forbidden to enter the deep roads, and the remaining golems of Orzammar became coveted and are only to be used in the most dire circumstances. Then Queen Getha was then deposed. Now, the Darkspawn used the tunnels of the deep roads to travel to all corners of the continent, and the memories record that large forces of Darkspawn began to bypass barricaded thags to strike on all surfaces from unexpected quarters. Although the dwarves sent warnings to the human kingdoms when they could, they had little assistance to spare. The Darkspawn surfaced on the edges of the Tevinter Imperium in 380 Ancient, or 815 of the Tevinter era. The armies of the Imperium had attempted to face down the hordes, but they could not be everywhere at once. While the Imperial troops were more than adept at fighting elves and other humans, their armies were in no way prepared for the unyielding, unrelenting thirst of the Darkspawn, and the Imperium began to lose its ability to maintain cohesion. As hordes continued to rise up from underground, Tevinter was forced to turn its focus further and further inward, leaving its outlying territories to fend for itself. The armies were then called to protect the Minithrius above all else, whose cities had once depended on the Imperium's armies were then swallowed by the Darkspawn horde. As the Darkspawn advanced on the surface, the land around was sucked of moisture, blackened the earth, and turned the plants to dust. The skies filled the rolling black clouds that blocked the sun, and disease and rot followed. Not only had the Blight ravaged the countryside, but Tevinter citizens had to face the fact that their own gods had turned against them. Gifts and prayers to the old gods were unanswered, and many of them began to question their faith, some even going as far as murdering priests and burning temples. The people of the far northern and eastern reaches of the Imperium rose up in rebellion. The Magisters summoned demons in response, leaving corpses to burn as examples for all those who dared to revolt. Still, the Imperium began to fall apart from within, angry and disillusioned citizens doing what centuries of opposing armies could not. Now in 305 Ancient, or 890 of the Tevinter era, at the height of the Blight, the Order of the Grey Wardens was born. The Wardens were all seasoned veterans of the Darkspawn battles, elves, dwarves, humans, who all abandoned their allegiances, titles, families, and dedicated themselves to end the Blight at all cost. A fortress was built at Weishaupt in the Neanderfels, a region not as hard hit by the Darkspawn, but still strategically close to Tevinter. Led by the legendary Carinius, the first Wardens actively searched for more effective ways to fight. Records say that the Nakri of the Donark Forest were the first to suggest consuming Darkspawn blood, as his people were known to consume the blood of their enemies to absorb their power. The first Grey Wardens consulted many Tevinter mages who confirmed that there is power in blood, as blood magic was far from uncommon at that time. and the Wardens began to study the Donarch and the Tevinter practices. Some secret knowledge from the ancient Arthlian was provided, and elven slaves as well, on the condition that the Grey Wardens would hold elves equal from any other race, to the other races, and turn their efforts to the liberation once the Blight was over. Several notable Dwarven warriors led by Paragon Morak the Maul were also present at the Grey Warden's founding. They shared all they learned about the Darkspawn and with their Warden allies. Those discoveries led to the developing of the joining ritual that proved instrumental in their success. Those who underwent the ritual became nearly immune to the taint and could sense the presence of the Darkspawn and could even overhear the unspoken communication. This was also the first real proof that the Darkspawn were driven by a centralized, motivating force. Now, the Grey Warden's first recorded battle was at the city of Nordbotten, which was besieged by the Horde, and accounts tell of the Wardens mounting a now extinct griffin and swooping into the ranks of the Darkspawn, each facing 10 or more enemies at a time. The first Grey Warden's legendary success at the siege of Nordbotten is no historical exaggeration. The Darkspawn were disoriented, unable to distinguish the newly joined Wardens from their own, and the battle was a major victory, and it proved to be a turning point of the First Blight, giving people hope in Thedas that they much needed. The Wardens began to mount an aggressive campaign against the Darkspawn, reclaiming lands that had given up or were lost. They built fortresses at strategic points and grew in reputation as well in numbers, recruiting from all races and backgrounds. Beholding to no temporal or lords, they were free to sacrifice villages and fortresses that could not be won, preserving their might for the clashes that truly mattered. Now, meanwhile, on the surface, the Grey Wardens were met with great success in their early years. A group of Anders soldiers even managed to slay Dumas while he was on the run from the Grey Warden offensive. The celebrations were cut short, though, when Dumas returned unharmed. However, a few days later, in the years that followed, a Grey Warden scholar learned that the Archdemon's death had only forced its soul to relocate to the nearest body of Darkspawn, whose informed then twisted back to the shape of the corrupted High Dragon. It seemed that as long as a single Darkspawn remained, Dumas was immortal, and the Grey Wardens despaired. Eventually, Grey Warden scholars proposed that if Dumas was slain by a Grey Warden due to the Warden's subtle ties to the Darkspawn, his spirit would rush into the body of the Warden that had killed it, and unlike the Darkspawn, a Warden's body already had a soul, and resulting in paradox would then destroy both the Warden and the Archdemon. So essentially, in 203 Ancient, or 992 of the Tevinter era, the Grey Wardens formed a formidable force made up of largely Tevinter, Dwarven, Ravani, and Serlain or Orlais soldiers. Now, Serlain are really Orlais soldiers, is just what they called themselves back then. In a coordinated attack, they slew Dumas and routed the Darkspawn forces at the Battle of Silent Plains. A third of all humans in the armies fell in that battle, and records do not say who exactly gave up their soul to destroy Dumas, for many Wardens struggled against him. The Archdemon's death slew 7 or more of them, essentially meaning that it took 7 or more humans to just counteract the Archdemon's soul. Now, the Dumas did not return in the years that followed, and although the Darkspawn horde remained large in number and the battles persisted, without the Archdemon to lead them, they became disorganized, and by 195 Ancient or 1000 of the Tevinter era, they were forced underground for the surface world. Now, the Blight was over. Now, the Grey Wardens used the victory to sign contracts with the nations of Thedas, ensuring their rights and solidifying their authority. The right of conscription was also granted in that order into the order in that period. The Wardens swore to stand vigilant against future Darkspawn attacks on the surface and preached constantly about the possibility of another Blight, but most of the Eodosians were reluctant to listen. Soon after the surface world began to claim victory, the Darkspawn hordes were driven underground. They continued pushing the crumbling Dwarven Empire. Though the Darkspawn did not coordinate their attacks well without an Archdemon to lead them, they lacked in focus. They made up with the savagery and the weight of their numbers. Those who survived did only this by cooperation and the sealing of most of the deep roads. Communication between the surviving Dwarven kingdoms began to falter, and each kingdom elected its own king while maintaining allegiance to the High King of Orzammar. In the year 40 Ancient, or 1155 of the Tevinter Kingdom, or Tevinter era, sorry, the High King Threestone of Orzammar, with the consent of the Assembly and the Great Sorrow, ordered all deep roads to be then permanently sealed. Within a decade, word reached Orzammar that Hormok and Gundar had fallen. Kalshorak had no direct access to the surface world, and no word was ever received. And this led the dwarves of Orzammar to eventually conclude that they were the last ones standing. Now, 189 Ancient, or 1006 of the Tevinter era, the Grey Wardens encountered an intelligent Darkspawn, eventually capturing the most powerful, a Darkspawn emissary known as Corypheus, and sealing him in a prison of their design hidden in the Vimark Mountains. They hoped to study Corypheus, but later abandoned the plan and the prison when it became clear that Corypheus could influence others with the taint. When released of his prison in the Dragon Age, Corypheus mentioned that entering the Golden City, but knew nothing of his own state, unaware of the time that had passed between then and now. Even after the Blight, Tevinter was still loosely controlling most of the continent, and the only organized nation in Thedas, but that army was scattered and its morale was dwindled. With the Imperium severely weakened, the barbarian Andraste called for an exalted march against the Imperium 28 years later. Thus, we are done with the First Blight. I hope you all enjoyed this. I know it was a long time coming, and I applaud and thank you for your patience. Obviously, you know, this took me a while to get out, but I love the Dragon Age series, and I'm happy to be back doing this, so I really hope you guys enjoyed this. And as always, if you just stumbled upon this video, maybe suggest giving this a like, and maybe subscribe if you like content like this. I'm always willing for suggestions in the future on content in terms of what topics to cover. And if you already subscribed to this video and you're just giving it a watch, I hope you enjoyed, and please consider liking it as well. This has been a lot of fun, and I hope to see you guys in the next Dragon Age video. Peace. If you just happened to stumble upon this video and enjoyed, maybe consider subscribing. If you are a returning subscriber and you enjoyed, please hit that like button. It really helps way more than you actually think it would. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Peace.